right, so I'm logged here into the Power Apps platform built into Office 365. So I have my waffle here where I can access all my other Office 365 apps, etc. And as I'm logged in here, we're going to go through the process kind of start to finish with a brand new request that we could put in all the way to closing out a project at the very end and show you how it can all work from start to finish through the process. So first, I'll go into my project requests here. And so what this can be is a place where you can capture different requests that people have, other people from other groups of the business, whoever it might be. We can open this up to as many different people as needed to be able to show those different requests. Instead of people sending you emails or talking to you in the hallway or whatever it might be, and you don't always get all the information you need, and you don't have one consistent place to go look and review and start prioritizing those requests, this can be a great way to do that. And or say get out of your Excel spreadsheet and into a more standardized list that we can then report off of and have workflow around and so on and so forth. So you can see there's a lot of different requests coming in. If I wanted to fill out a new one, I just come in here and hit new and fill out a little form with some basic information. And this is configurable, so we can capture the information that you want. But you can see here I'm capturing some basics, who's requesting this, what's the estimated budget, so on and so forth. And even generating a high-level prioritization score based off of the information that someone has put in. If I click on one of these, I'll go into my request here for support customers using mobile. Then it'll load in kind of all the details, and I can see what's going on around this particular request, what state it's in. Right now it's been approved, this particular one. Other ones might be in earlier states, so on and so forth. And we actually use Flow once it gets approved to convert this into a real project for us. I like to think of this like a funnel. We may get lots and lots of different requests that are going to flow into the system here, and as it gets to the right stage, we can then promote it to be a true project. That way, our project list doesn't get clouded with all kinds of things that you might not necessarily need or want, and or you're not going to do for a long period of time. So from there, it'll come into the projects list, and those projects can be aligned into your different portfolios and programs. This is configurable, so we can configure any hierarchy you might want. So instead of portfolios and programs, maybe I want product lines and products, or applications, or however you want to categorize and group up your projects into these different portfolios. The system is configurable, and we can set it up to match your structure. In here, in our out-of-the-box solution, at the very top, I have my different portfolios. So you can see here I have multiple different portfolios, some basic information around those, overall health state, what type of a portfolio is it, so on and so forth. And if I was to click into one of these, like my cloud and mobile first portfolio, you'll see that I can capture lots more details. As mentioned before, just like everything else in the system, this is configurable. So if there's other information you want to capture at the portfolio level, we can add those fields and such into the system. If there's things here that don't make sense to you, we can remove those. So we can configure this and kind of tailor it to your business, to your process, to the data that you need to capture. What you see here, though, is there's also a timeline. So I can actually see a history of what's been happening, different calendar events, phone calls that may be happening, meetings, whatever it might be, those types of things. And those can actually all automatically roll into here if you're using the Outlook plugin for Power Apps as well. If I flip to the Financials tab here, you'll see that we've set up a budget for this portfolio as a whole, $9.5 million, right? And we're saying that's how much you can spend on this particular portfolio. We may increase that later on, but for now, that's our cap. We can't spend more than that. As we go and then build out our programs and our projects below that, we're going to do more detailed budgets at, say, the project level and then let that roll up. And so you can see here so far from all the projects that we've identified that we're going to do and we've built budgets for, that then rolls up and says, okay, it looks like we're going to spend about $3.8 million, which is not exceeding that. If this was exceeding that, that would be a problem. We're planning to do more projects that cost more money than what we've been allocated to do for this particular portfolio for this particular period of time, right? And then we can see what's left and, then go and start to figure out where we're going to spend that money. And we'll do that as we continue on through the demo here. You can also do the same thing on the benefits side. We're looking to get about $20 million of benefits, at an ROI of about 1 or 100%, depending on how you want to look at that. And you can see what your estimated benefits currently are from the projects that we've already identified and that are looking at. There's also a status view of this, so we can see, are we on track from an overall perspective, financial perspective, schedule, effort, so on and so forth. How many active projects do we have going right now? 7. How many at-risk projects, so on and so forth here. From there, I can see, okay, what are all the programs that have been identified for this particular portfolio? And I can look at those right here and see a quick overview of how those programs as a whole are doing. If I needed to add a new program, then I can come here and I can hit the Add New button and kind of build this out as I go. I'm going to drop down one more level. I'm going to go into a particular program here, like my world-class customer support program. And you'll notice it's very similar to what you could do at the portfolio level, except for it's one level down, right? So now for this particular program, who's the owner of this program? What's the state? How's it going? You know, what's the timeline activities that have been happening, so on and so forth. And if I click on the financials tab here, again, I can see just for this program what I've been allocated, $4.5 million, how much I'm planning to spend, and so on and so forth. So you can really get your program level views there as well as the status on those. Below that, I can also see all the different projects that are going on for this particular program, the status of those particular projects, and drill into that next level. So what you'll actually see here is that same request that we initially put in got converted into a project. It was eventually aligned to this particular program into that particular portfolio. And so I'll see that right here, my support customers for mobile project. I could also just the same go straight to my projects list, see the list of all my projects and what's going on there, and then jump into my support customers using mobile project right there as well, right? So things can flow in starting as requests, and then you can align those to your programs and portfolios and let that all roll up so you can see the program level view, the portfolio level view, and or you can just go directly put projects in. CEO comes to you and says, hey, we have to do this. It doesn't have to start out as a request. We can just go drop that right in the projects list if we choose to do so as well. As we're going through that, you'll notice that there is a workflow, a process that has kicked off here. And then we can track this project now through its different stages as it continues on through its life cycle. So right now we're in the planning phase. We're starting to build out our plans. Later on, we'll get into manage/execution on this, and so on and so forth. On my project page here, I have all the information you might suspect, at least, it's kind of default things. What's the priority? What's the type of project? Is there an executive sponsor? Start dates, finish dates, so on and so forth. I can also start to build out my business case around this before things get approved. So I can give a little description, some narrative around the business case, possibly a value statement, and we can start to do some prioritization here. So I can do a more traditional prioritization where I identify things like how strategically aligned is this to my business objectives? How much is this going to help with employee retention? Can I help lower costs? What's the risk? And based off of those choices, it's going to give me that prioritization score there, which I can start to use to make some choices on prioritization. If I'm looking for a more modern and or agile type of prioritization, SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, actually recommends using WSJF, Weighted Shortest Job First. And so basically you identify some different metrics here like business value, risk reduction, so on and so forth. And then that gives you a prioritization score there. Some people have one way, some people have another way, and if you choose to do so, you might use both. And or if there's a particular way you want to do your scoring, we can configure that in the system for you as well. So as I identify a new project and before it actually gets approved, there's some questions I'm going to have. There's some information we're going to need to put in so that we can get this approved. One of the very first things that we might need to put in is a high-level resource plan. I need to better understand what resources it's going to take to do this project, how long I'm going to need them for. Is it one person, 10 people, 20 people? What skill sets I might need? Is it developers? Is it QAs? Is it engineers? Is it, whatever it might be, before we can go ahead and approve this and do some high-level capacity planning. So what you'll see here is I have a high-level resource plan. In this case, notice some of these resources are actual named people, Daniel Williams. I know I'm going to need Daniel Williams for this project. Others are just generics. I just know I'm going to need a developer. I don't yet know who it's going to be. I don't need to know. We can fulfill it later as we go through the resource management planning process, right? You could also just do this high level by team. I know I'm going to need this team 50% for the next 6 months. And so that's what this all allows you here to do. Think of this as very much like an online Excel spreadsheet. I can come in and just kind of key values into here. and or I can go look for candidates while checking to see who's available. So if I wanted to come in and search for people by role and see all my developers, then it'll come in and show me my developers. I can see who's available, who's not, expand into them and see what they're already working on in what particular period of time. And when I find someone who's the right person, and or if I just want to grab that generic developer role for now, I can add them up into my resource plan and then allocate them accordingly. So it makes it really quick and easy to build this high-level resource plan, right? I haven't built any tasks or schedules or backlogs or anything like that yet. I'm just high-level trying to identify the resources I need. And this allows me to do that. From there, you might also need to create a budget. And one of the very first pieces of this for creating a budget is I can come in and I can hit import, and I can import in that resource plan to give me my labor budget here. And so you'll see it automatically then populates out your labor budget based off of your resource plan. We would have set up some blended rates in the system up front, so it knows how to calculate that all out. So I don't have to try to do that separately outside the system in Excel or some other thing. From there, I can just key in any other types of expenses I might need, like materials, travel, contracts, or other, so on and so forth. You can kind of just key those values in. And that all then rolls up and totals up and gives me my total budget of $346,000 for this particular project that I'm looking to do here. Later on, you can use the financial planner to also capture budgets versus forecasts versus actual costs and so on and so forth. And so I can come here and I can say compare my budget to my actuals, and I can see the differences between those things. And it'll highlight that in red, yellow, green, etc. So I can see where I'm over, under, so on and so forth. And be a little bit more analytical as I actually start to execute on this particular project, right? So once you have your financial plan and your resource plan built, then more from a portfolio analysis and or selection perspective, more of a portfolio manager and or a steering committee could come in, and we can look at all that demand that's coming in through the portfolio analyzer, and we can do some prioritization and really start to build out our timeline / roadmap based off of, within the constraints that we have. We only have so much money, we only have so many resources. How are we going to get this all done, right? So to do that, I'm going to switch here over to my prioritization view, and we can then start to do some drag and drop based prioritization based off of the information that people have put in, though. So you can see here's that prioritization score that I showed earlier that came from these different choices that people made, the information they put in. And based off of that, if I just want to do it just flat as it says, I could just hit sort and go, okay, here's the highest, next, 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 all the way down. But a lot of times that's not necessarily what people want to do. They want to have a little bit more control over it. I want to look at the information and then prioritize based off of what makes sense to me, based off of other information I may know that's not necessarily 100% captured here, right? So I can flip this into prioritization mode, and I can simply come in here and just start to drag and drop and go, okay, this one I think should be a little higher than that one, and this one's lower than that one, and build out my list here with the highest priority at the top and the lowest priority at the bottom, but while looking at objective information. And I can pick and choose what I want to show in this view. If I wanted to add in other metrics to help me make my decision, I could look at things like, expected ROI, NPV, other financial metrics, or any other things that you might be tracking to help make that decision. Cool. So from there, I now have my prioritized list of projects, and I now need to figure out when I can do them or if I'm going to do them. Maybe some of these lower priority ones we're not going to do at all. Let's take a look if we have the option to do that. And so the next thing I can overlay on top of this is time. I can look at how are these things laid out over time, based off of when people are asking them to be done. And so you can see here there's a timeline around these guys showing the current of what people are asking for. Some of these projects are active, in progress, we're already working on those, whereas others are proposed, and so those are things that we need to figure out how we're going to fit into the mix within the resources and budget we have. To do that, I can overlay another layer on top of this and basically show, I'll start with here, my budget side of things, right? We only have so much money. How are we going to make this all fit and work? And so what I can do is I can create a target. A target is basically, say, my budget for my whole IT organization or for this portfolio of projects that I'm looking at, however you kind of organize and break things up. And I go, okay, I have $150,000 a month to spend. I need to make sure I don't exceed that in any particular month. With our current plan, you'll see we're good for the first few months here, but then we get yellow and then we start to get into red when we start introducing all of these new proposed projects. That's a problem. We have to try to fix that. So a couple things we can do is we can say, well, what if we don't do a project at all, or we put it on hold? And so I can simply uncheck these to do a what if, and you'll notice the bottom grid then refreshes and shows me what that's going to look like if I was to do that. Now we're good in April. That didn't quite fix things, and I can kind of keep going up the list until I get it, as green as it needs to be, right? That's a option, is unchecking these, basically saying, what if we don't do it? Another option is I could come in here and I can simply drag and drop these guys and move them around. So it's not a matter of if I'm going to do it, it's when can I do it with still staying in my budget. So I can drag and drop and move this out, and then it'll refresh accordingly and show me how that's going to affect my budget as we maybe stagger these projects a little bit more. We can then save that as a scenario and come back to it at any point and say, okay, scenario 1, hey, we're not doing these 4 lower priority items. Scenario 2, we'll do them. It's just going to be a couple extra quarters before we get them done, that kind of a thing, right? Then you can do the same thing on the resource side. So it's not just looking at my finances, but I can also look at the resource side of things and go, well, that's all great. We have the money to do these projects in this particular period of time, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the resource. And you can see here there are some issues. And so I can come in here and I can look at that and I can do all the same things, check, uncheck, move these guys, drag and drop these around, and figure out how I'm also going to make sure that I'm not overloading my resources, which then is going to put my projects at risk of going off schedule and over budget and so on and so forth, right? So the portfolio analysis tool can really be used to build out that high-level roadmap timeline of when you can and should get things done based off of the priorities while keeping in mind the budget and resources when you're building that out. You may have noticed there's also some dependencies in here, and so you can actually create dependencies between these different items as needed. I should point out we haven't got to execution yet. We will get there in just a second, meaning actually going and working on these projects. But some of these projects we may go and execute on in an agile way. Some might be in a waterfall way, and we can execute on those in a variety of different tools. And so what you'll see here is just that. Some of these we're using Project Desktop to build out a waterfall schedule for these. Some of them we're using Azure DevOps to go build out an agile backlog. Some of them are hybrid, so meaning a little bit of both. We might have an agile backlog for some pieces as well as a waterfall schedule for other pieces of the project. And we'll get into that here in just a second and show how that all works. But to this point on, everything's the same. Doesn't matter if it's waterfall, agile, or other. It can all go through the same standard process with the same workflow, same resource capacity planning. It's all together, in one plan, right? So from there, I can jump in and I can take a look at my Kanban board. So what I'm looking at now is all of these projects, same projects, but showing it in more of a Kanban board view. So if you want to visually see where these things all lay out from one status to the next, this is a good way to do that, as well as there's drag and drop here. So if I wanted to, I could drag and drop to update that particular status. But I can group this any which way I want. Maybe I want to group it by priority, for example, or maybe I want to group it by business unit or whatever it might be. You can on the fly switch this and show it the way that you want to show it, by overall health. And it's all drag and drop. So I go, actually, this one isn't at risk anymore. That's off track. I can drop it over there and it will update accordingly, so on and so forth. There's also a roadmap view built into this. So if you need to be able to visually show people in a very clean and easy way a roadmap of when things are going to happen and also those dependencies that I mentioned between the different projects, this can be a nice way to do that. In this case, I'm grouping it up by state, and I'm showing all these projects over a particular period of time, and you can do this by week, month, quarter, year, and really any of the things that I've showed today can be grouped up different ways like that. I'm coloring it by overall health, so the red ones are the ones that are off track, yellow are at risk, green are doing pretty good. You'll even see a progress bar on these guys, so you can see how much progress we made on them so far. And from there, we can show this in a Power BI report, or I can just print it right from here if I wanted to do so and send that over to someone and say, here you go, here's the roadmap, here's when we're planning to get these things done, as it currently sits. So lots of power and functionality built into that portfolio analyzer for doing your portfolio planning and building out that roadmap. So now that we've done that, we've basically selected what we're going to do, when we're going to do it. Now is really, we're approving that to the next stage, and now we're going to get a project manager or scrum master or product owner, or whoever it is that's really going to be managing the execution of that project, to then come in and build out, excuse me, the more detailed plan. So I'll come back into my project here, my support customers using mobile project. And to go build out that detailed plan, I have multiple different options. If it's a waterfall project, then I may want to build that out using Project Desktop. And so if you have trained project managers that are familiar with Microsoft Project Professional Desktop, they can utilize that to go and build their project schedule if need be. And so I'm going to flip here into my schedule view, and what you'll see here is a high-level schedule. And so we have it broken out into different phases and stages. Under that are some subtasks, and people are assigned to my tasks, and we have start dates and due dates and kind of all the normal things that you might expect. I can also show my Gantt right within here if I want to get a quick Gantt view on this and how that's going, and a timeline and so on and so forth. I won't go through all the bells and whistles there, but all the scheduling things you might expect. But this is actually connected up to Project Desktop. So you see here, status is connected. And I have the schedule open here already. And so if I wanted to make any updates and or build a new schedule from scratch or from a template, I can open up Project Desktop, I can build that out. And then when I'm ready, I just hit publish. When I do that, if you have single sign-on, it'll automatically push you through. If you do not, then you'll just sign in there real quick. And then it's going to connect up to OnePlan and Power Apps in the CDS database, as Jim mentioned earlier, and it's going to publish that all in. So I'm able to get that all in one place instead of people having all these Project Desktop files separately on their desktops, and there's no good way to report off of that and get one kind of consolidated view of everything, right? So I can publish that in, that brings that into here. If it's an Agile project, then you may want to connect this up to an Agile tool. In this case, you can see here in my backlog view that I have some different features, user stories, tasks, bugs, so on and so forth. And this is actually connected up to Azure DevOps. And so it's connected there, and it's syncing in that information from Azure DevOps as people are working in Azure DevOps and updating status and adding user stories and whatever it might be. It'll automatically pull that in, as well as I can click a button to pull it in on demand at any particular time that I might need to if I want a more real-time update there. So it'll grab all that information and roll that all in, so I have it all here again in one place for reporting off of and status and so on and so forth. You may have noticed, though, I have both a waterfall schedule and an Agile backlog connected up to this particular project. And that's absolutely fine, and we see that a lot. A backlog is really good for managing and tracking work and saying, here are the things you need to do for the next 2 weeks. Go ahead and do them, and we can track the status, and we can kind of keep iterating going on that. But one of the things it's not great at is telling me, when do we think we're going to be done with, say, the MVP of this new product or this new feature that we're building or whatever it might be. And so what a lot of people choose to do is also possibly have a high-level schedule that tells me the different phases and stages that I'm at, the progress on those, and we can actually use them in conjunction. So I could have an Agile backlog and a waterfall schedule, or one or the other, depending on what you're trying to do and what output you're trying to get, what information you need for reporting purposes, basically, to provide that status. Going down the line here as we're working on this and we're updating status and such, the person who is managing the project manager, scrum master, product owner, whoever it might be that's doing that, can come in and they can simply update their status on these different guys here and do so just by clicking the button. So we can have these calculated and or make it more manual. I want the PM to manually be able to say this project is at risk based on all the information they're looking at, and or these can be auto-calculated by information in the system. For example, schedule health goes to red if you're more than 10 days off track, or things like that, right? Down below, though, I have the option to also put in some narrative. So if I come here and I add a new status report, I can fill out a little bit of narrative around what's going on. So it's not just all data. I can put in some other things. What have I recently accomplished? What's planned and upcoming? And any additional comments I might have. That's all going to roll into my particular status report as I go through this and go through the process there. So you can also include that into the mix and keep a history of the status on these different dates. Status at this time was this, status on this date was this, and see how that changes over time, and hopefully things are getting better. I can also from here track risks, issues, change requests. So if you need to be able to do, say, risk management, understand where your risks are, how risky this project is, maybe even roll this up into a risk matrix, and we'll see some reports a little bit later. It's as easy as just coming in here, hitting add new risk, filling out the information, save, and I've now added that new risk, which can also roll into my reports, status reports and other. Same with issues if you want to track a list of issues and any change requests, whether that's scope, cost, or other, schedule, etc. You can track those in here and have workflow around this so we can get approvals on these as needed if they're of certain types and say over certain thresholds, so on and so forth. Cool. So as we're managing all of these different projects, resource managers kind of need their view of the world and a place to come in and see what's going on and make adjustments. You know, just because we planned it to happen this way doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen that way. So we may need to come in and adjust things and fulfill resource requests and so on and so forth. And so I can do that right from here. So what I'm looking at is a list of all my resources. I can come in and I could filter this down if I just wanted to look at a particular resource or set of resources, you know, just my developers or whatever it might be. And I can also group this up. Maybe I want to group it by role. So I see a little bit more summarized view of things. Here's each of my roles. I can then drill into my developers, see all my developers, who's over allocated, who's not, you know, so on and so forth here, and let that all roll up all the way to the top. This is all editable, so I can drag and drop and move things around if I need to do so to reassign different projects that these different people might be working on, and or make adjustments or drag and drop and move things to the right or the left if we need to stagger them a little bit more. And there can be a negotiation or an approval process around that so that the resource manager is not just making updates, that it can be a negotiation between the project manager and the resource manager if you choose to do so. That's an optional capability there. From a team member perspective, I can come in and I can see all of my different work and update my status on it, as well as if you choose to do so, you can utilize the timesheet module in here. So if you need to track time, you need to understand who spent what time on what tasks and what projects on what days, whether it's on the Agile projects or the waterfall projects. You know, we have time all together here in one place. So I can come in, fill out my standard timesheet, save and submit that at the end of the week, and then have that run through an approval process as needed as well. So it's really an end-to-end system for being able to manage the project all the way from a request, all the way into execution, and then closing the project out once that project completes. As we're going through all of these projects, and you know, we need to give status and we need to give visibility into what's going on to management, to stakeholders, to others. And so there's a full set of reports out of the box that allows you to do just that. So connecting into all that great data that's there in the common data service, we can then build these different reports. So we can see things like budget and forecast and actuals across our entire portfolio. I can go into more of a health summary type of a view where I can see which particular projects are going on, the status of those projects, budgets versus forecasts versus actuals, and whatever other information you might want to show in these reports. These are just a starting point. From here, we can tweak these. We can add in other things that you might want to see here and group this up the way that you want it. Maybe I want it grouped by program or portfolio or application or whatever it might be, so on and so forth. And I won't go through all the different tabs of the report here, but there's reports around resources, around financials, you know, issues, risk changes, so on and so forth, depending on, you know, what you're looking for here and what type of a report you're trying to get. These reports in Power BI are very consumable, and there's lots of different ways you can consume them. You could simply go into the system and click the link like I just did. And you could give someone this URL and they could go directly to it. And or there's some other cool things like maybe I want to subscribe myself and or others to this particular report, meaning they're going to get an email as frequently as I say, you know, once a week or whatever I might need to be with that particular report. So I no longer have to be the gatekeeper. I no longer have to go manually build these reports, which can take up a lot of my time, and then manually email them out to everybody. And then when they have questions, they have to ask me and this and that. We can more make the information available, you know, in near real time so that people can access it as need be through the way that it makes sense to them. There's a mobile app for this. I could access these from my mobile phone. I could print these out if I need to do so. I can export them to PowerPoint if I need them in a presentation, so on and so forth. Lots of different ways you can consume these different reports and get that visibility out to the people that need it in the way that makes the most sense for them. On top of that, Teams is a really great tool for collaboration, and more organizations are starting to utilize this, across, people that are built into the Office 365 platform as a whole. And everything that we've seen today really ties into Teams, and can be utilized right through there. So that initial request list that we had showed originally with all the different requests, and this isn't just a screenshot, this is a live working request list where I can do all the things that I showed earlier, can be tied into, say, my portfolio management team. So I've created a team here across our whole, PMO or EPMO or whatever it might be. And I'm going to make certain things available across these different tools and such that we're using. So I don't necessarily have to work directly in Power Apps or in Power BI or whatever it might be. I can work just in Teams if I want to do so. And on top of that, I get all of the Teams capabilities like conversations and file shares and so on and so forth. If I wanted to put in my timesheet here right from within Teams, then I can go to my timesheet view that we were just looking at. So as a team member, this could be the place where I could come in. I go into that particular team, I come in, I load up my timesheet, and I fill out my time from here and save and submit. Right? So I can kind of work with things the way I want through the interfaces that I want. The portfolio analysis that we did can be available through here. The report we were just looking at can be available through here. And if you're using any other tools, and there's a whole ton of connectors in here, then I can come in and I can add tabs to whatever other tools that I might be using from any one of these 200-ish connectors that are in here, and tie in other applications that I may be using. So it's all together in one place, and it's one place that I know to go from an experience perspective to get the information and do the things I need to do. I don't have to go to all these different tools separately and try to do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. It brings it all really together. At the same time, you could have a team really around a particular project. So I have my VoIP phones project, and I can go into that project and see my conversation stream around it. I can open up my OnePlan plan for this particular project, and be able to show that resource plan, that financial plan, the schedules that we were looking at earlier. All of that can actually be available right through Teams, so I can do all the same things that we were doing earlier. The resource planning, the financial planning, my schedules, my backlog, so on and so forth is all available through here as well. So it can really help, give people one place to go to access all the different tools you might be using, and all the capabilities you might be using to really get the work done and pick the right work and so on and so forth from start to finish.